Hello, I'm Terry Durham from River Hills Harvest, and I've been growing elderberries for the last 2 decades. I'm here today with my partner, Chris Patton.
And I am Chris. I'm president of Midwest Elderberry Cooperative, and we work together not only in marketing retail products, but Terry's a member of the board of the cooperative, and we work very strongly to grow the number of farmers that are including elderberry in their crop plan and their farm plans. And we're going to talk today about processing for primarily small producers. Up to this point, most of our growers are what would be considered smaller scale in an agricultural world. We do have a future of larger commercial production. We do have buyers that want to buy in large volume. We just do not have enough production at this point in order to enter into those contracts in advance that will assure a larger food process or beverage processor of enough supply for them to spend the money to introduce a new product. It's not a easy thing to bring a new product online, and it's fairly costly, and they don't want to see product disappear. I worked for 5 years for Pillsbury back in the late 90s, including international R&D, where I worked with ingredients and new product development and with processing engineers and food scientists. So I understand the process, even though I work primarily in IT. I'm not a food scientist, and so I'm not going to address some of these food science issues that we will touch on in survey today. But we want to start with even on the smallest scale, such as processing for yourself.
Well, it's getting to be that time of year where it's time to get those berries picked and harvested and then figure out what you're going to do with them. You know, we've picked those berries, and once you have your berries harvested, you need to get them destemmed and sanitized properly, and then get them frozen. And we almost always start with frozen fruit when we're going to process, even for a small scale or whatever you're going to make your stuff from juice from home. We generally start with the frozen product because it lets loose of the juice really easy when you
And
start to
we talked
process.
about that in more detail in one of our other presentations, so be sure to go watch that one. We're not going to repeat all of that here right now.
So now we're going to say you've already got your berries, and if you're smaller and you're just going to use them up yourself, or you're going to try to sell them at the farmer's market or to some of your local friends, there's a lot of different ways you can process those berries for sale. You can do them in bags and sell bags of berries. You can pick. You can have fresh berries at your farmer's market. You can make muffins out of them. You can make other baked goods that you could sell on a smaller scale.
But most of the time, though, even in farmers markets, farmers are going to sell frozen berries because the fresh berries don't last so long. And if you freeze them the day that you pick them, they're going to taste better, and they're going to be better for your consumer or buyer, whether it be commercial or a citizen that comes to the farmer's market and buys a load of berries from you. And that is the way to go. They don't keep very long when they're fresh, and you don't want them sitting in the refrigerator for very long either. You need to use them up, and so having a plan in advance is important.
That's right. And a good freezer.
And a good freezer. One that works.
One that works. And make sure it works before you try to put stuff in it to freeze. It's always important that you find your equipment, get it all together, make sure it's all going to be working when it's time to put it in.
And that you have enough if you've got actually some acres planted.
You know, most of our commercial growers are just selling the frozen berries to us or to other processors which use those frozen berries, and we have to, they have to make sure that they've come into compliance with the different food safety regulations and the new GAP rules and stuff that's out there set up as barriers for the farmers, but it gives a good quality produce that you can trust when we do that.
And you need to work with your county people on that because there are differences in the specifics of the rules and how they might want them applied.
And so the GAP trainings, every state's doing GAP training. It's not hard to find a place to get some good agricultural practices training, and it's going to be required by a lot of people. You know, we like all of our growers that sell to us commercially to have a GAP plan and GAP training, which Usually the state has a qualified instructors where they teach you how to comply with the rules. And mostly it's just about staying clean, keeping your hands washed, using clean containers to put stuff in, having having good potable water, which means you need to have a water test done. A lot of places are going to have to
That's
start
usually a
complying with that.
requirement, and you got to document it.
And those are some of these rules are just starting to come into play, so people aren't as aware of them, but you still are going to need to be doing them. They're starting to test more and more for them.
I guess one way to put it is that things you might have assumed because you've always done it right now require some kind of documentation or proof to a third party. And you have to, it's like any kind of form. If you don't fill it out right, it's not acceptable. You have to use their forms and do their process.
Right. So we have some of those basic forms we've outlined from some of our growers, and,
Right.
and you can get those online from us if you look. And they're simple, just the times and dates, and that's all you need to do is to meet those food safety compliance from GAP.
And then don't lose them.
And don't lose them. Keep them on track. Something you'll have to go with your product to the processor, so you can assure them the quality of the product that you're getting. And so once you have your berries and you've got them frozen in containers, you got to sell them. What are some good ways to sell those berries?
Well, a lot of growers will sell them at farmers markets or online or just to friends and neighbors. There's a huge demand for it. Also, a lot of times you might have a local craft brewery or winery that's looking for a new type of flavor. Kombucha brewers are also big buyers of frozen berries. And we're pushing and emphasizing the frozen berries here because that's where you're going to make the most money. Other than that, probably freeze-dried berries would be your next best bet. And that means you can store them without keeping them in the freezer. And you can do different things with the freeze-dried berries than you can with the frozen. And freeze-dried preserves usually on average about 97% of the nutrients in berry fruit. So it's a good deal for the consumer, even if they have to pay a little bit more. The big market online is for thermally dried berries. Those are imported from Europe almost exclusively. They're coming from places like Croatia and Bulgaria or Poland. And a lot of them are wild collected, which in Europe is considered certified organic. And wild collected berries only have about 50% of the nutrition of farm berries, according to European Union research, which I have posted on the Midwest Elderberry Cooperative website on the functional foods ingredient page. And so, they're good, but for your money, it's worth paying more to get locally dried berries. But the problem is that the European berries are so cheap, comparatively speaking, with all the work going in, that by the time that a farmer dries berries, they're not really recovering any profit. They might get their costs out of it. If they are able to sell direct, you can make some money on that, but you better have your buyers up front. I have been doing my best to educate people that are used to buying thermally dried berries to switch over to the frozen berries. And even people that make like syrups, where they may have first run into a recipe using dried berries, you can make them with the freeze-dried berries. We have those recipes online. And you can do the fresh berries or frozen juice, which we also have at times. And those recipes actually, to some of our small business owners, are better. It's less work for them. They get more product for the pound of berry, and they feel like it's likely delivering more nutrition because it is less processed. So those are some, farmers markets are a big thing. And now the other thing is that you have to decide how this is going to work for you. I do have a number of members who do the whole thing vertically. They grow the fruit, they freeze it, and then they make their own jams, jellies, or syrups and sell those at the farmer's market. You're often much better off selling value-added product than you are just the frozen berries. And you're going to get paid for your labor there, but not everyone wants to do that. But there are people that do, and do so quite successfully, and thus earn a significant amount of income off a small acreage of elderberry.
I know it's really easy to sell that syrup. A lot of people are making nice elderberry syrup from home, and they're able to sell that online. And at the farmers markets, and that's a pretty good product. From you don't want to forget about that. The U-picks. Those also work. You
Right.
can get rid of those berries. Have people come out and pick them themselves. That way, you don't even have to package them up any other way.
Right.
Now, if we're going to be selling commercial berries, then we have some different regulations and
Right.
different things that we need to do to be in compliance with the federal government on those berries. And we like to buy them in those 25-pound pails.
Right.
And
Standardized.
so that they're all the same. So we want all our growers to put them in those same kinds of pails. And then the market's huge. There are lots of people. Once you have a stabilized berry in a bucket, frozen,
Right.
then you have a really marketable commodity on the bigger picture.
It can go anywhere. And actually, when I was doing more of the actual farm work with my partner Paul Otten, a lot of times we had to partially thaw those 4-gallon containers and then divide them back up into gallon bags and for consumers, because we didn't make enough 5-pound, 1-gallon bags in advance. And we found that you could partially unfreeze them and the berries would separate and do that very well, still being fairly frozen, and then freeze back up quickly, and we didn't have any trouble with that. So on small scale you can do that, especially with people that you know. And so that's also an option. With U-pick, the main thing is you want to make sure that who's doing the picking is doing it right, and that they're picking right berries and know what a right berry is. And we had a little discussion here earlier on. I've had a few new growers who have said, I can't get 25 pounds into a bucket. I only get 22 or 23 pounds. And Terry said,
that's because they're not filled with juice. They would have been floaters. They didn't skim them off. So
the berries weren't ripe enough, in other words.
Right.
They were a little too anxious to get in there. They weren't looking for that dusky dark berry, which is a ripe berry. So if you see you're having that problem, then give it an extra day or so and let them become fully ripe.
You want them to get a little bit dusty when you pick them. I know it's easy to get out there and they're looking like they're ready to go, but you want to make sure they're really ripe so that they're heavy and they won't just float up when you start to clean them off and throw them away.
Right.
You want them mature and heavy.
And
so what about the flowers? Now,
yeah,
people are able to sell the flowers pretty well.
Oh,
I know
yeah.
We've just started working with the fresh frozen flowers, which we think, for the farmers, that brings a little more opportunity and profit to them. And we've learned through research from the University of Missouri that you need to pick those flowers in the first 2 hours, because
Right.
they'll start to lose their the things that cause them to smell, and
the aromatics,
and the
that's basically
terpenes and
nutrition.
the phenols. They all quickly go away, and within 2 hours after sunrise, they start to lose them. And by midday, they say they've lost almost 50% of the power that they could have. So we pick them the first 2 hours in the morning. We bring them straight up, and that destemmer that we made for the
Right.
berries, those flowers work in there too.
Yep.
You can take those umbrils of flowers, put them in that destemmer, and then put it on, and it'll shake those right off. Then we take those right to the freezer and get them frozen. So we try to get those flowers from the field into the freezer within 3 or 4 hours.
And you have to do that even if you're going to thermally dry. The only difference would be you do want to work with dried flowers. You don't want to start trying to dry a wet flower. And so that would mean picking it a little bit later, just as soon as the dew is off, but still early in the morning, in order to get the aromatics. And with flowers, a big thing is to have the pollen in there, because that's where the energy is. That's where elderflowers, used as hops before hops were used for brewing, kind of comes in there. And then, of course, the dried flowers are great for various herbal infusions. You can make a distilled liqueur from either frozen flowers or dried flowers or fresh flowers. And same thing for wine, because basically with the flowers, a lot of people are using them as a source to make a simple elderflower syrup, and then they actually use the syrup itself in the other products, whether it be a royal wedding cake or a high-priced liqueur. And so, making an elderflower syrup is another potential product that you can do. And just as a reminder, your different on-farm products are going to have different requirements as far as food safety goes too. So don't assume because you got it down for, say, a jam or a jelly, it's going to work for a juice or a syrup. You need to make sure before you get it into production and try to sell it.
That's right. And I guess the other way the flowers, we've started this last year or so, seeing some of our growers freeze dry the fresh flowers. Now, have you been able to sell any of those yet,
They
Chris?
don't sell as well. They don't. I mean, there has been some demand, but it's kind of hard at this point. We haven't had enough real good market supply on that. People aren't used to looking for that. And that's what I have to say about any of the small scale production. You need to know what is it that your consumer is looking for already, and at least have that. If they're used to looking for like elderberry jam, you better have some elderberry jam in order to bring them to your stall at the farmer's market, and then you can educate them about something else you might have, or elderberry syrup, which is another very common thing that people are looking for. Education of a consumer or buyer is a big deal, and it doesn't happen all at once. And so you need to have something first that they recognize and can relate to and feel good about, and buy, and then want to come back and buy some more. And they say, well, that's so good, I'll listen to what you have to say about the other.
So the flowers are strong, and there's a lot of the market for them.
Oh yeah, we can't. I could sell thousands upon thousands of pounds of flowers, dried flowers, if I had them.
But it doesn't make you as much as selling the fruit. You got to remember that. But one of the things we've learned about production, though, that brings it good in with this whole little conversation, is that we can harvest the early flowers, the flowers that are near the ground, and take up to 20% of the flowers and not affect the overall harvest. That's what the university has published now, and they have told us that. So the ones that are close to the ground are the ones that you're going to run over, or they're going to hit the ground. Then you're not supposed to sell any fruit that's touching the ground. And sometimes those first ones that are coming on don't pollinate as good, the ones down by the ground. So that's where we started taking our flowers. We go in there and we take the flowers from the plants that are low, or the ones that are hanging over that we're going to hit with a tractor when it gets fruit on it. They're never going to really make it to the end product. We take those flowers off there. That gives us bigger heads with more berries on the rest.
And that's usually about the first 3 feet off the ground, because the canes, being 6 to 8 feet tall, they'll bend over easily. And another way to look at it is that this is a bonus revenue stream for taking good care of your orchard, your elderberry orchard. Because once you go through and take the flowers, then you should walk back through and probably cut or trim some of those low canes that are going to get in the way of your mowing, because you want to keep your aisles in between your rows of elderberry mowed throughout the year. Because when it comes harvest time, you don't want a lot of grass, because a number of the pests, such as the spotted-winged Drosophila, which is the Asian fruit fly, like it in the tall grass. So we don't want tall grass, because we want to discourage that fly, which attacks ripening fruit, as opposed to our native North American fruit flies that only attack the spoiled or the broken fruit.
That's right. And when you mow, you get a good circulation through your orchard, good airflow, keeps disease down, stuff like that. So that's...
And also talking about the early flowers is important, because I've noticed that unless a lot of flowers are open at the same time, you don't get good berry set. I have experimental plants that flower at different times, and I've got one that comes later, and its berry set is never as good as the others. And that's the only reason that I can have for that.
We just learned a little bit from a researcher that came up at an agroforestry conference I was at. And he said that he had been asked by one of the researchers at MU to do a pollination study, which is, I've been asking for a pollination study for years and never really was able to get to the right person. But he was the right person, and he was retiring from the university.
That's perfect.
And he came up, we've never wrote this up or anything about it, but here's what I found when I did this. And he said that the pollen on the varieties of elderberries, the American that we were working with, took about 3 days for it to ripen, after the flower opened. So there's this little period when the very first flowers open, where they're not going to get pollinated. And I know if you can pick those for your flowers, they're the very best. But after 3 days, the field has so many flowers generally that everything's pollinating everything. So it's just the very first flowers that come on. You see that a lot of times they don't have very many berries on them when they're on there. We've been trying to figure that out for a while. We knew it was something with pollination, but now we have a little more information. So
Right.
I'm pretty
That
bully
makes
on
sense.
trying to take those very first
Yep.
flowers and get them out of there. And then we're trying to leave an occasional shoot that we don't cut off, because generally we cut all the
Right.
orchard down. We only want to grow 1-year-old wood, primocane wood,
Right.
because it makes twice as big a heads at the top, and we like to pick
And
twice
it's a
as
lot
big a
easier
heads.
long-term field
Oh
management.
yeah, and they're all up high. They're not like picking a strawberry down on the ground.
Right.
So we're working more on that. We're going to have more information, we think, in the next couple of years. We'll get to do a little bit more research, which can maybe help with some of that.
Right.
So we're thinking pick those very first flowers. It's kind of hard to do. The very first ones, you've been growing them for years, and then also you got to go out there and clip off that flower. But it's probably not going to pollinate if it's down low, especially, or if it's the very first one to open up. Just go ahead and take it off. Got to leave a few on there because you got to have a few flowers to help pollinate the very first flowers that come on when they do start. So
Right.
you don't want to take every one, but you can take some of them pretty safely.
And they smell so great.
Oh, they do.
And you'll find if you make connections with a restaurant where perhaps you're providing them a number of different produce or fruits, it'll be a real bonus if you can offer them elderflowers fresh when they're in season. You can get a premium for that. It's usually worth it. You won't do a high volume, and I'd see it more as a way to keep a good customer or maybe to get a new customer. And you'll only make a couple of trips, but it's a big marketing factor if the restaurant can provide fresh elderflowers on their table or in some kind of dish that they're serving up, or dessert or drink or something.
There's just so much opportunity in the elderberry world
Yeah.
out there for the flowers and the fruit, and even the plants that you can make after you've done your trimming of your plant, of your coppicing off in the winter.
Right.
Then you can sell your stems and make it into more plants that you can expand and grow your orchard as big as you want. I mean, the opportunity for elderberries is large, and there's lots of room for people. And here at the River Hills Harvest, we are really trying to get more people to buy and to grow, so that we can buy their fruit, so that we can make more juice, and we can keep more communities healthy and happy out there.
And there's
bring some wealth back to the farmers.
Absolutely, and into the communities. And part of our whole strategy with the co-op is a decentralized regional one, so that we can keep the production close. We can keep it any juice or jam production close to where the berries are actually grown, so we don't have to ship it all over the place. And then hopefully also to take care of our commercial buyers with berries that are grown from that region. And there are a lot of opportunities that we haven't even touched on here. I've had people call me that want to buy leaves.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
And stems. Sometimes you can just sell the whole stems.
Well,
for researchers.
and
roots. You can sell the roots.
Yeah, second or third year that Paul and I were growing, we got an order for stems for Harry Potter wands.
Yeah.
So you just never know what you're going to get when people know that you're growing elderberry.
Well, we're continuing to try to just supply the needs we have here in the United States. We're not worried about sending anywhere else. There's such a demand here, and we need so many more growers to grow elderberries to bring this production up, because it brings that health and wealth back to the farmers and to their communities, and that's what we want to see. That's why we're here today, because we want to spread that word. We need more people to grow elderberries, to take care of themselves and their own medicines they can make in their communities, and to be able to help us make enough juice to keep the general communities out there for the bigger areas, because the demand is there, the profit's there, and now we just need the farmers to successfully start growing the elderberries.
And this is part of where the cooperative has for the future, because the cooperative right now does not do a lot of large scale. I mean, I've sold tens of thousands and orders of 50s and 60,000 pounds and things like that, but that's not normal. Normally we've been doing smaller volumes, but the future is larger acreage and larger volumes, and I'm running into more and more growers that don't want to market for themselves, and we have a ready commercial market. I have no problem in selling I'm sure millions of pounds if we had enough time. If I had 500,000 pounds right now, it would probably be sold in a month or two, and then I'd have demand for 1,000,000 pounds because people would hear that we have that kind of elderberry available. And the co-op, like other agricultural co-ops, through the distribution right shares, also gives the grower a chance to participate in the profits and losses of the co-op, like any other cooperative. But small growers can be members and can get some benefits, such as being able to buy from each other wholesale if they have a bad harvest some year, so that they can have supply for their own on-farm or products that they might be making, so they can stay in business and keep their customers satisfied. And of course, sharing in the research and providing a base and participation as much as they want to in such research.
And some growers, they even buy back their product. They'll sell us
Right.
the berries. We'll process it into juice and products for them, or because that's what we do. We make them into products, and then we'll sell them back to them at below our wholesale price, and they can sell them again. And when you can make twice profit on it, you sell the berries, you make some profit there, then you're selling other things. You're at the farmer's market, or you have friends, and you sell your juice under our label. You're going to make profit again.
Yeah,
We have to keep track of every bottle. We know whose juice is in there,
what farm, when it was
farm,
picked.
and when it was done. So we can get your juice back to you, and you can sell it again.
And some growers who are maybe new and wanting to develop the market have been buying product wholesale from me and selling them at farmers markets. And then they looked into making some of these things for themselves, and they decided, I don't want to mess with all that. I'll just sell the berries, and then I'll take the River Hills products to the farmers market to sell along with their other crops or products and things.
And we can
that they're
document that
focused
that's
on.
their juice
Yep.
in those bottles. If
Yeah,
you need it.
well, and I have one in case where they not have enough volume yet, but they're already developing the market, which is smart, and so that's good too. And then on the smallest scale, I mean, you can grow elderberry for yourself, and if you're processing for yourself, you've got your own common sense to determine your judgment. I for ease of it, use a steam juicer for a lot of my elderberry that I grow in my yard. And I can mix it with other fruits, apples, fallen apples, or grapes and things that I also grow. And you can have some fun just blending different elderberry and other fruit flavors, and you can have something fresh and easy to go that way as well. But again, I'm using frozen berries. You've got to get to the frozen berry. That's the foundation.
How would you join the co-op if somebody really wants to get involved, Chris? How would they become a member of the co-op and have all this advantage? I mean, you can spend days just reading the stuff on that site.
Yeah,
and you can get lost in the research. It goes
I'm
on
glad
and on.
glad you reminded me, Terry. Yeah, I've been pretty good. Wherever I can get my hands on an article, or if Terry finds one, or some of the researchers at the University of Missouri or Minnesota, I put it on that website. And it's actually it got so big I had to divide it into 3 websites. So I have a primary website, which is the first one you're going to get to, which is primarily focused towards people who want to buy, but also gives introductions to the health information, the grow information. So, but on those grow tab, there's another place to click, and that takes you to a complete grow site. And there you'll find past presentations that Terry and I have given at his previous workshops. So you can see sort of the history and the development. And there's a membership page, which will allow you to learn about membership. You can download all the bylaws, all the forms, and of course my phone number's there, and I do answer my phone, so that you can reach me with any questions you might have. And as I mentioned briefly in one of the other presentations, I literally have members from California to Virginia and interested all over. And people want to get in on the elderberry because they know that it is going to be good for the customer that they have. It has good profit potential, even though it may have some additional work, and particular emphasis on labor. You know, when it's harvest time, it's kind of like having a state fair business, Terry. I look at it, you know, most of the year you're just doing a little bit and you're getting ready, maybe lining up your raw materials and packaging or whatever and your labor. But during the fair, you're working all hands on deck for long hours, and that's the way it is once the elderberry harvest goes. And there were many days I'd get out, you know, early in the morning, and I wouldn't get home till 9 or 10 o'clock at night. That's just the way it is, and you need to have people. And I would say that is needs to be planned for. You cannot ignore the labor, and of course you will need less once people become more experienced. And Terry has a really good crew, and they go through a much larger volume than the average farmer is going to do because they have that experience. But you can do that too.
And we would love to buy berries from you. So hopefully you're learning from the videos the Savannah Institute's putting on, and you're going to be able to become a grower for yourself or for River Hills Harvest or for your own community.
Yep, because Terry buys berries, the co-op buys berries. The co-op also refers customers. I get calls from people all over the country that want a few pounds, and I'll just refer them to a grower if they're anywhere close to one. So we're here to help you and to help this industry grow. And we really do have this community cooperative spirit in what we're going about, and we want it to be win-win all the way around for the environment, for you, the farmer, for your community and family, and for anybody that you sell your berries to, whether it be a big company or your neighbor.
I just wanted to give a brief update on the webinar series that Savannah Institute is holding. This is our last summer series webinar. So that's pretty exciting. We made it through the summer virtually. It's now a small feat. In our fall nutshell series, we're actually partnering with the University of Missouri, the Center for Agroforestry, and we're beginning that series the second Tuesday of October on the 13th. And that'll go until April, every second Tuesday. And there'll be more information on our website on that, but I just wanted to announce that. We're pretty excited. We're doing panel discussions, so we'll have more than one presenter on at a time. But without further ado, I'm gonna hand it over to Chris, and thank you all for joining us today. This is very exciting.
I'm unmuted now. Okay. Elderberry harvest and the difficulty in harvesting and processing the fruit is what has kept it from being a commercial crop. And when the pioneers came over, they recognized the berry. It was similar to what they had in Europe, but they're much smaller. They grow a little differently, and it was too much work for use commercially. However, they did keep it in their hedgerows and on their farm for personal use. And so that's pretty much how elderberry has been used up to this date. Some small herbalist practices and people doing and growing some on their own farms. And that's good. And about over half of our members in the Midwest Elderberry Cooperative do make their own products and do supply their local areas, regional areas in some cases with them. And in that case, the co-op is a backup source of information as well as product where farmers that may have extra can sell through the co-op to those who need more because perhaps their crop wasn't so good or their business has outgrown their ability to produce enough to supply everything they need. Okay, that stays off. And so it's the key to this is destemming, and Terry Durham is the one who developed the first commercial destemmer of any kind of capability. It is a batch process. It doesn't work in a continuous flow, and it takes anywhere from 3 to 6 people ideally between the ones working the destemmer and harvesting and how fast they go. It can do between 300 to 500 pounds an hour. A lot of folks, including myself, have worked with it with only 2 or 3 people. It's less efficient, but it does get the job done, and is okay if you only have a few acres. We're working on, and a number of the growers have other adaptations on the destemming. There's a modified grape destemmer, and one grower has in Iowa that has worked pretty well for them, and they put that together with a conveyor system as well for the washing and sorting the berries, and then dumping them into a scale-weighted pail. There's some others that have been experimenting with rotary systems that haven't actually gone into series production yet. I have another engineer who designed one that does single batches on a centrifugal spin, but the capacity is great for a small producer, but it's pretty high cost. It's really a nice little machine, but it would only work for a place of 2, 3, or 4 acres because it does about 25 to 50 pounds at a time only. So this is a key thing. We do have a few other folks that are working on something that will be a little bit more continuous flow and a little faster, but this is a key factor in why we have always encouraged our growers to start small and to scale up as they have the ability to actually get the crop in. So this is something that will be different, I'm sure, as early as 2 to 3 years from now, but until it's there, you can't count on anything much better than what Terry's destemmer can do.
I'm sure he will see them, give us the call, and will call me on his phone.
Do you need any specific things? Do you need any specific things from us?
Get my choice or get his login and let me do it.
Can you write that on a piece of paper?
Yeah, I'll have to come back. So anyway, that's about all I have for the introduction. The tape, I mean, you guys have already watched the series, is that correct? Do you have any questions then? I mean, the key here is the quality aspects of things. The buyers don't want to see a lot of green or unripe elder. They don't want to see a lot of stems. The stems are bitter, they have a bitter taste. You might have some folks who, you know, a winery or something like that is able to deal with less than perfect berries. But the market has been pretty much focused on having those nice, dark, destemmed native elderberries.
So we have our first question here that I heard in the video that wild elder isn't as nutritious as commercial grown. Why is this, and is wild elder marketable?
Okay, that was based on an article on, from the Functional Foods Journal that is posted on the Midwest Elderberry Cooperative website on the health section. And if you haven't noticed yet, there are 3 separate sections. They do link, cross-link. I apologize, it could probably be a little bit better, but if you go to the health page and you start reading, I have some of the articles there, and then there is a link to the whole website where there's a lot more material on the health benefits and the nutrition and things like that. And one of those is the functional ingredients page. There's others from the International Symposium we had in 2013. But what we need is to basically look at that principle from that article, because it does not specifically refer to North American elderberry. It's dealing with the European Sambucus nigra. And what they found in testing the European elder, that the farmed elderberry had twice the nutritional capacity and potential and just goodness than the wild collected. And the basic common sense explanation for that has to do with investment in soil. If you invest in the soil and you have got good healthy soil and you've got the micronutrients in there and the mycorrhizal, that higher soil nutrition will show up in the berry. In wild collected situations, it just is going to vary based on the nutritional area of any one wild locale that is harvested. And broadly over the Eastern Europe, where this is very common, what they found is that the nutritional content was half of what was farmed in, say, on a elderberry cooperative in Hungary or on a farm in Austria or southern Germany. So a lot of the elderberry that is sent to this country from Europe is wild collected. Most of what is sold as dried elderberries from any of the larger online marketers, I'm not going to mention any names, but it's probably, if you bought dried elderberry from online, and unless you're buying from a really high-priced reseller, you're getting it from one of the major importers, and those are usually coming from Bulgaria or Croatia, and most of those are wild collected. I had some work with one of those companies, and they said they did have questions about quality control, and you know, there's no way to deal with like the spotted wing Drosophila, which they also have in Europe. And so here, if you're in a managed farm situation, you know what's going on, the farmer knows what's going on. And because we don't harvest berries that we know have been, you know, really ravaged by that little Asian fruit fly. And then otherwise, there's no way to know if these berries have just been had eggs laid in them. But if you freeze them upon the harvesting, that stops and kills that process, and it does not affect the quality of the berry from a commercial perspective. And in fact, if there is any kind of growth there, the yeast and things of the Asian fruit fly are more, shall we say, positively flavorful, as opposed to the North American fruit fly, which destroys the taste of any fruit. I hope that answers your question. The main factor there is soil. And then very secondarily would be harvest conditions and handling at post-harvest.
Well, and once you get the pests in there, you get a little bit more protein in the berries too, right?
Yes, but you know, that fly is a real problem, especially for those folks who do you pick berry harvesting, like with raspberries or blueberries or something. And,
Oh, sure.
and many of our growers are growing other berries besides elderberry, because your consumer can come and pick what looks like to be beautiful berries, and if they don't eat them right away, they put them in the fridge for a couple of days, then those worms keep growing, and all of a sudden you start seeing mushy berries, these little white things in there. But freezing changes that, and of course the elderberry is so small anyway. And when you're picking, I mean, you can tell that if you've got flies buzzing around that sign, you're going to cut that and trash it. You're not going to use that or put that in your harvest. The same thing as if there was bird poop on it. You know, you're not going to use that and sell that.
Right. Which varieties would be best for northern Minnesota? I'm 45 minutes northwest of Bemidji, and are some varieties less attractive to deer?
I don't know if anything's less attractive to deer. The factor on deer seems to be more local habit and what other food sources are available in the overall deer population. A lot of growers don't have much trouble with deer, and then others have a lot of trouble with deer. I had a relatively new grower. He was hoping to have a decent harvest this year for the first time, and the deer got most of it. They were eating the berries, not just the plant. So he's going to have to put more work into deer fencing. Other growers, I know in Missouri, they can get permission to do hunting when it comes to the picking time. So if people start hunting the week before you pick the berries, the deer aren't stupid, they go away. And so then they're not there in the field. But fencing is very common. And then it's the same thing with birds. There's the birds, you know, it depends on if they're used to looking for it and if you're on a flyway. So it seems that farms that are along our major river flyways have more trouble with birds than others. And certain kinds of birds give more trouble than others. Waxwing, I think starlings are some of the worst ones from what I remember from people telling me. I did not have either of those problems to any great extent where I was farming at Natura Farms in west, you know, that'd be east central Minnesota. The deer only occasionally took anything. The birds only nibbled around the edges, and it wasn't enough to do specific work to try to prevent that. Up in Bemidji, you're in that area, anything north of Alexandria, your local environment is going to be key. You want to have as much sun exposure as possible from as early in the year as possible so you can lengthen the season. We have had really good luck with Adams in northern Minnesota, central Minnesota, and Ranch, and less so with Bob Gordon. But I think the plants also become acclimatized over years as well, because it is very flexible. But the key there is going to be having a short season. And I have some presentations on that are listed on the presentations page, which is on the grower section of the Midwest Elderberry website. Again, it's kind of like the health. You go to the grow page and then there's a link over to where there's much more. And I have all past presentations that I've given, as well as many that Terry has given and other growers. And you'll find more information there about growing in northern Minnesota. One other strategy would be not to cut them all the way to the ground, but just to prune them, because that will cut about 2 weeks off of your growing season requirements. And Ranch also tends to have a little bit earlier growing season. Adams seems to be the most vigorous in the northern climates, and we've even had it bear a crop when we had to cut it to the ground in mid-June because of hail damage. It was so bad, and so we just cut it to the ground, and Adams still had some yield. I hope that helps.
How much stem is too much? I destemmed this year for the first time and there's always the small bits left. How do you determine another check is needed for quality of the berry shipment?
A lot of that's going to be, what does it look like? I mean, anyone who has had any experience with elderberry is not going to be surprised if they see a little stem. If you are, and this is an area also for research, because some varieties, cultivars, release more easily than others. And I've got one that is wild that I'm experimenting with. I call it soft, because the cyme is very soft and green. The berries ripen very evenly, and it comes off the cyme very easily. The berries seem to be a little bit smaller, and I've had no other further research, and I don't have enough consistency on that yet, but that's the kind of thing you're looking for. You're looking for the even ripeness, and you're looking for just the right amount of release. You don't want it to come off in the process of picking too much. You want it to come off once you put it on that screen. Now, some of that is also going to come strictly from how much you are running the destemmer. And if your berries are ripe, fully ripe, you're going to be seeing some fall off the cyme. And that's about what you want. You want to see just a little bit that's so ripe that it's coming off, and then you can pick the rest and it will be more ripe, mostly ripe. Those will detach from the cyme more easily. You won't have to go over the destemming so much, and you'll get more berries and fewer stems. It's an art, and part of the appeal there is the eye. It's the same thing. I mean, if someone's looking at it, oh, there's a green, but you know, that may not be trouble if it's just one. But if they start seeing 5 or 6, they're going to say, oh, I don't know. And it's the same thing with the stems, and that will depend a good bit on your buyer, and of course on the harvest availability of elderberry, which right now it's very scarce, so people will be less complaining. But you want to have pretty minimal. So what you mostly see is berry and just maybe just little tips here and there of tiny pieces of stem. And this is where, you know, also when you go through the triple wash, a lot of that will float off and you can skim it off and get rid of it. And different people have taken different approaches. I know some people want to rinse first, then wash with the peroxide or bleach solution, and then rinse again. And the Terry, in his way, he goes first into the peroxide or bleach and then washes doubly. And it's through those wash cycles that's your quality control area, and getting out the big pieces of stem or leaf or thing. And so, you know, depending on how many berries you have and who you're selling it to and how well they know you and what their requirements are, you have to adjust your quality control accordingly.
Do the flowers get that same washing process?
Typically, we don't wash the flowers. I mean, if you saw dust on them, yes, you would do that. But we want the pollen, and so flowers would be harvested in late morning as soon as they dry off from the dew and before it gets too hot. And then you've got to keep them cool once you've harvested them until either you put them into the syrup process as fresh, or you can freeze them. You can stuff them into freezer bags and pack them loosely in a freezer. They'll keep, I've had them keep for me for over a year. And then you can make syrup from that, or you're going into a dryer. And you want to do that pretty quickly as well. And if you do the drying, you don't want to stop the drying once you start, otherwise they'll turn color. So flowers are a big potential. There's big demand for the flowers too. And dried flowers are probably the easiest for most growers, unless you know you have a buyer who's going to like make syrup, and then freezing them might be really efficient for them. On a smaller scale or for your own use. Oh yeah, that's what I was going to say. We do have Main Street Project in Northfield, Minnesota is a member, and they are working right now on developing protocols and a system for larger scale drying of flowers using a modified leaf blower and a whole system. And as that comes along, we will be posting that, and it will be made available online.
I think this next question has a lot to do with personal stamina also, but how many acres can I hand process before I need to buy Terry's destemmer?
Well, you know, I have one of his hand destemming systems, the hand basket and things. And if you have a sink that fits into, you'd be more efficient than me. I basically use it for my own berries, and I don't need to wash them for myself. If I were going to sell them, I would do that unless I knew the buyer up front knew that they weren't being washed and just frozen unwashed. Some states prefer it that way for berries. I found it works well for me. I don't have issues because I don't have a lot of the volume, and things are going in there clean. If I dropped it in, I mean, I didn't have really a situation where they'd get dirty where I'd have to wash them, but I would if I had to. So with flowers, well, let's see, I lost that. Did I answer the question? I'm sorry. There's a lot of things going through my head, and this whole, because it is all evolving, and there are a lot of different practices out there. Oh, how much can I before getting? I wouldn't go over half an acre. That's 2,000 pounds. That's a lot of berries to destem.
That is a lot. All
you
right.
can do, if you're really good, you can do between 50 to 100 pounds an hour with that hand destemmer. You know, if it's just for your own purposes or for someone who has more tolerance for stems, then you could try freezing them first, or freezing your extra and then destemming after freezing. A lot of people do it that way too. You do tend to get more stems that way, but if you're going to make wine out of it or something like that, that's not a big problem.
Okay. So Amy is a solo grower with about an acre of elderberries. This year it was difficult to keep up with the picking, destemming, washing, weighing, and freezing of the berries myself. The price per pound.
Absolutely.
What?
Yeah, I've been there, because at Natura, we counted on volunteer labor, and they didn't always show, or they weren't able to come when berries were ripe. And so there were many days that I was there alone, or working just with Natasha Simeon or Antonio DiMaggio, and just two of us trying to deal with it. And it is a lot harder, believe me.
Well, how do you suggest someone on a small scale becomes profitable? Because hiring increases costs.
Well, I suggest that you find some good people that want berries and pay them in berries and get them to work. There are a number of folks that don't mind going out and working for, a few days and helping out, and they want their elderberry, and it's so scarce right now. It's worth, on a direct sale, $8 to $10 a pound. Otherwise, people rely on family. They get high school folks. I had one year, I had some of the employees from Lake Winds Food Co-op came out to help harvest for a day. So you could try some of those, some school groups, and combine it with education and some working if they're a little bit older, so that you can be sure they're picking ripe berries and not unripe berries, or you put them to work on the destemming and you pick it yourself. But it's the labor is a big challenge, and it's a big challenge for scaling up as well, because many of the farmers who want to grow 10, 20 acres are used to working, with machines to handle these larger size plantings of corn or soybeans or whatever. And with elderberry, at this point, there's still a lot of hand harvest. We do have some growers that are experimenting a little bit or want to experiment with some mechanical picking, but that's only going to work if we can get cymes that ripen really well. And this is where the University of Minnesota sees opportunity, but they've yet to find the money to help us with that, and finding the genes that turn on the ripening, the even ripening, and the release from the cyme. Those are things that you can modify without really doing genetic modification, because it's still the elderberry, and you're just turning a particular gene on that's found in elderberry that tends to help the ripening. And if we can get a cyme that ripens evenly and releases just right, then mechanical picking might work. But right now, there is none that's being done commercially, to my knowledge, in this country. Even in Europe, they mostly hand pick, as far as I know.
Dang, that's the same with hazelnuts. Still trying to figure out how to mechanize that.
Yeah, they haven't trained the squirrels to go do the harvesting nuts for them. It's just.
Oh, that would be so cute. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it would. Or even Chip and Dale.
Oh my gosh. Susan's biggest holdup for planting 5 or 10 acres of elderberries is the lack of processing facilities, because even freezing is just considered processing. Any thoughts on that?
Well, okay, so freezing and having a place to put the freezing is a consideration. Many growers buy used freezers, those old big old chest freezers, which you can get for a decent price used. Others have capacity for freezing because they have other products or other veggies or things going on in their farm that justifies having the facility in place. Many of the growers in Missouri who are sort of, I call mid-scale, they might have 5 to 15 or 20 acres, will lease the trailers, the frozen trailers, and use those as a temporary basis in order to store the destemmed berries in the 4-gallon, 25-pound containers. And the thing I can say at this point is that at this time, if you have berries and are worried about selling them, you just call me, because I can pretty much have them sold as soon as you're ready to to get them sent out. Now, if you're doing larger quantities and we're looking for frozen LTL trucking, you know, for 400, 500, 600 pounds or more, then we do need a dock, a loading dock at the end of a paved road for the trucks to come up. The LTL trucks won't go on a dirt road, and they must have a standard size loading dock so they can use their forklift to move your pallet of berries, and it has to be palletized as well. Some folks use Americold, others, some of the farmers have their own trucks and they will fill them up and run deliveries, or you can rent a truck and run a delivery. That's where it's at right now in most cases. I have a grower in north central Missouri who lives near a friend of his that he knows that specializes in these kind of trailers. You can buy one, and you know, it depends on the time and your size and scope. But most of the smaller growers are using freezers, and basically they're getting them sold out of the freezer and then reusing the freezer because of the high demand at this time.
So I wonder, there's more of a clarification question on how many stems is okay. And I wonder if the commenter wants to have a discussion about that. If you want to unmute yourself and maybe ask your question.
Yeah, that'd be fine.
I'll give them a couple seconds.
You know, basically, you know, when I'm looking at it for my own use, I don't mind a little bit. I steam juice my stuff mostly. And I don't want to see what I call multiple branches of stem. A little piece of a stem is not of a problem, but I don't want to be able to say, oh, that was a branch and it's got a few berries on it or whatever like that. No, I don't want that, if that's helpful. And you don't want any of those bigger stems. You know, you can get away with some of the little hairline ones.
Yeah, there's like a lot of examples right here. So it's like with pie and with wine, but I think maybe your question clarifies.
Well, wine is, you've got the most flexibility. I have bought jams and have eaten pies that had stems in them. And even the jam that we make for River Hills Harvest, it's made by one of our growers, has a little bit of stem in it, but it's not a lot. And you've got the sugar and it's been softened and cooked. But you know, you don't want it in every bite. You know, if you get it in every 3 or 4 or 5, there's a little bit of something. I don't think it bothers people. That same would go for a pie. You don't want to be able to notice them. It's a sort of an artistic thing, and you know, that's the best I can do on that.
For small grower, less than an acre, are frozen or dehydrated berries more profitable?
Your best bet is freeze-dried berries on a small scale. You'll get the most profit on that, because I'm selling them for $9 an ounce, $100 a pound. And I'm buying them from other growers at a little less than that. And they're very happy with getting, you know, a little over half those prices for themselves. And that comes out because at about 5 ounces of frozen or fresh berries will yield 1 ounce freeze-dried. So you can get about $80 a pound with freeze-dried.
So everyone on this webinar should contact you, it sounds like.
Yeah, I can sell. I'm selling freeze-dried berries, and yeah, I strongly encourage you to sell directly. And if someone calls me and I know where you are and they're close to you, I just refer people. I've got a lady in Lake Wales, Florida, Central Florida, a little south of Orlando, and I've referred a half dozen people there in the last year who wanted to buy berries, and I've got others in different places that I've done that in Missouri as well, and so, and of course Minnesota, where I was living until recently. So that's selling direct is great because you can get anywhere from $7 to $10 a pound right now for frozen berries selling direct.
If people were interested in selling directly to you, what else would they need to invest in? There's the freezer, the destemmer, what else?
Well, basically what I want is anything from, I mean, typically I'm selling 25-pound blocks, but if you're willing to send out a 10-pound frozen package of elderberries, priority mail in a sort of a foam-lined insulated pouch, you know, in a bag so it's not going to leak, and you're willing to do that work, I have people that will buy it and pay you to do that. Because I have about somewhere between 200 and 300 small businesses that source from the co-op, and I have no way enough berries for that. And many of them are just looking for a couple hundred pounds, and so if they can get 20 pounds or 50 pounds instead of none, they're very happy.
Are elderberries sold through the county tree sale worth planting commercially?
Well, that's a double lottery as far as I'm concerned. It's the same as if you're getting seeds from the county, which a lot of people have. You'll have a mix of good and probably more than half that are maybe more work than you want, unless you're just growing a small amount of them and can be picky about it.
If growers have SWDA problems, would harvesting flowers for pollen be profitable to sell to you?
Yes. Yeah. Northfield is, Main Street Project in Northfield is testing a hypothesis that they could net about $3,000 an acre from flower production alone and avoid the SWD issue altogether. Their focus right now for elderberries primarily to develop flower harvest, and they've added more acres for that purpose. And so this is not something we're going to learn overnight, but in a few years as the new plants are established, and some of them are the wild ones that I had experimental in my yard, you know, we'll test that out. But they figured they could gross about $6,000 an acre and net about $3,000. And we don't know if that's realistic. That was based on them scaling or projecting up the fields that they do have and what they're able to harvest off of them. But it's like anything, that flower harvest does vary from year to year as well. I mean, we've had heavy rains several years that have knocked flowers off of growers, and so they haven't had flowers available for that reason. Others, they didn't have the labor, because it takes labor to, when the time is right, you have to be able to get the people to do it as well. But that's a little easier to do in late June, July than berry harvest time in August, September.
What is the price point for co-op purchasing frozen berries from growers in any market for the fresh flowers within co-ops?
Yeah, right now for instance, we pay $25 a pound for dried flowers, and we're paying $4 to $5 a pound for frozen berries. And that's depending on sustainable amounts, certified organic, things like that. And I have paid as much as $5.50 a pound for certified organic.
All right. Does anyone want to unmute themselves and ask a question? We are through all of the written questions thus far.
I think I saw something about SWD. In case you missed this on an earlier discussion, Terry Durham and I both, but of course he's much larger scale than I am, used neem successfully on working with it, dissuading the SWD. Otherwise, it's primarily a cultural thing. we harvest the flowers from about 3 or 4 feet up off the ground so that we don't have low-hanging berries because the fruit fly likes to be near the grass, and you've got to keep your grass cut short. And basically, you want your masses of elderberry, whether they be in rows or any other kind of configuration, to be not too fat. You want to have about 3 to 4 feet at the most wide, so you get plenty of sunlight and air in there. The more sunlight, the more air, the less the flies like it, and so you'll have less trouble. And that seems to be working. We think the reason neem works is it interrupts the breeding cycle in the soil, not that it's killing the flies in the air or anything like that. They don't like the smell. Japanese beetles don't like the smell, but it won't completely deter them.
Have you had any success using cover crops instead of, so you're not constantly mowing grass?
Well, you know, I saw a really interesting presentation through Forever Green on some clover they're working with, and I think that has called Cura clover, and it's hard to get a hold of right now. It's originally from Azerbaijan, and they have been working with it to put between corn rows and soybean rows as a perennial cover. I think it would work great with elderberry. I said so when we had that conference discussion through Zoom, and but no one has really done that yet. I've got a fellow in southern Minnesota wants to experiment with kernza and between elderberry as another crop and money earning crop that's also a perennial. You want something that you can mow, or that does not get too tall. And mostly a lot of folks have used white clover as opposed to red clover, which is a little more unwieldy and gets bigger, etc. But the white clover stays lower and crowds out a lot of the weeds. And there's been some concern more on the East Coast that harbors some diseases, but we haven't had that trouble in the Midwest.
Okay. And then do you put neem on the fruit or the leaves?
All over.
Just spraying? Do you have like a backpack sprayer?
Well, Terry, I have, you know, I use a simple garden sprayer. Yes, it's like a backpack sprayer, and I'll just drench the whole plant and the ground. And Terry does it with out of the back of a pickup and you know, commercial scale type of stuff. But he does the same thing, and he just puts it on heavy. I've asked him several times if he has any kind of specific measurement, and he says, no, I just put it on heavy, liberally.
What is premium for organic? Is it worth it? I plan on starting next year at 1 acre on a 3 acre plot, expanding to the full 3 acres rented from another farmer. I would be unlikely to do organic on the spot. Also, would you recommend, given the choice, one long row or shorter blocks of rows?
Yeah, I like planting elderberry in blocks of rows, cultivars in a block, because they do send suckers. And if you've got rows that are, you know, even just 8, 10, 12 feet apart, and he says 12-foot center, but they're only going to be maybe 9 or 10 feet apart. Elderberry will shoot the roots out, and you can have some mix of cultivars within the row. So I like planting them in blocks, and that also might make harvesting and harvest control a little more easier, especially if you've got a team of people, because it's easier to identify, okay, go pick this block, go do that block. And the different cultivars being in blocks as well, the flowers will be more likely to be opening at the same time in that block, and that's going to improve the pollination and berry set. I find that in smaller plantings, like in my yard where I had a lot of different varieties, that those that flowered later and they didn't have as many other open elderberry at the same time never had the same quality of berry set. When you have a mass of them Wind is a factor, I think, as much as the pollinators, and it helps to improve your total berry set. So that's what I prefer. And then, as I said, the other thing is keeping your rows thin. Don't let them get 5-6 feet wide. You want them 3 to 4 feet wide at the most. That'd be the mass of vegetation, not the stems. The stem width will be less than that.
Where do you recommend buying saplings from for planting?
Well, let's see, wait a minute. What was the previous question? There was something else. There was another thought I had about, because they were 1, 2, 3 acres, that question.
Yeah, planning starting on 1 acre and then expanding to 3 acres.
Organic.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, through the co-op, we pay 50 cents a pound more for certified organic, because the highest costs are the same for sustainably grown or organic. And most of our people who are growing sustainably are using organic methods, either entirely or in part. You only really need to go to certified organic if you have buyers that require that of you. So many smaller scale people, you don't need to do that. You can sell them directly to consumers and to local businesses who know your farm, and can put it on, as locally harvested elderberry, whatever. And especially since it's in such high demand and so little availability, people that would normally think they only want organic will take a sustainably grown elderberry if you can tell them, no, I didn't use any herbicides or chemical pesticides on it, or I didn't use any for the last 2 months or something. So I am, now if you're going to sell to an herbalist company or a major brand on a commercial scale, then I have to have certified organic. I've got a lot of major brands that would like elderberry flavors of things, but the only way they can justify paying what we need to receive for an elderberry is if it's certified organic and they can put it on the label. And that is pretty much true in any case when you're marketing, because once you start getting a product that goes further afield than folks that know you face to face or know someone who knows you face to face, you don't have enough money in advertising to tell your story to replace the value of being able to put those words certified organic legitimately on a label. I hope that's a little better answer. I did want to get to that. That's important. And most wineries and breweries don't care if it's certified organic too, and those are really good customers. If you've got 1, 2, 3 acres, and your local kombucha people, beer, wine, they should be using elderberry at least in some of their seasonal production, and it can be mixed with other things. I've had really good success. And the potential is even better on those types of buyers.
Well, and then you can partner with them to get their used beer mash or mash in general for nitrogen.
And some of them will come out and help harvest.
There you go. There's the partnership.
That's right.
This is more of a question for the group and for you, Chris, also, but do you know of any elderberry farms in northern Illinois and southern Wisconsin that would be good for one of our participants to visit?
Cabe Organics is in north central Illinois near Bloomington, and they have a pretty successful operation. I bought berries from them, and Terry's bought berries from them, and they're a few years into that, and they do certified organic other types of fruits and vegetables. If you don't overwhelm them, they seem to be pretty hospitable.
Or if you help them pick, maybe, yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, they're decent folks. It's just, it's like anything else when you're on the farm. There are certain times of the year you just can't, work something else into your schedule.
Yep. And then Leslie is saying a couple of things where if you're considering a certified organic, it requires a lot more and stricter regulations and paperwork. But there are other types of certifications that you can and should look into.
Yes, and you know, and that again, if you're selling, it depends on what your market is requiring. Who is your buyer? Who are your buyers? And what do they want? And what are they willing to accept at this time that's reasonable? And if they have a requirement that you're not doing right now, how can they help you make that happen? And then when it comes to certification and some of the costs, many states have programs where they'll pay for or help you pay for the extra paperwork. And one of the bigger variables also is the certifying agency or certifier. There are different ones out there, and the law is such that some judgment call flexibility is in there, and you might have some, for instance, that would say, okay, you can't get enough certified organic cuttings, so we'll waive that, and you won't have to wait for that on your certification, and others may not do that. You have to wait the 3 years because your cuttings, your initial installation weren't certified organic. That's just one example. There are others, use of plastic weed control, other little practices.
All right, we have 3 questions coming your way. Are Bob Gordons better for flowers? That's the first one.
Bob Gordon has great flowers. You know, I don't know if they're better, but they are beautiful flowers. Wildwood has beautiful flowers, and if I had both of those cultivars, I would focus Bob Gordon on berries and Wildwood more on flowers. The Wildwood berries are nice too, but as we mentioned in earlier seminars, and I think even on the videos, the Wildwood is a little harder in field management because it sways and droops more. But other than that, it's a beautiful plant.
All right, so the second question is regarding the blocks of rows. When you say 3 to 4 feet wide, is that for the drip line?
Yes, essentially.
Drip line canopy, actually.
Yeah, it's the canopy. It's the mass of the plant. So it's going to, typically you're going to start seeing that from 2 to 3 feet above the ground up to the top of the plant, which will be 6 to 10 feet, depending on the variety and how well established it is. And the year, soil, etc.
So the third question in that series is regarding SWD. Are you guys spraying as a preventative measure before the onset and then as the berries are beginning to ripen?
Well, if you're going to use neem, and then this is what I do, I start in the spring because it's a whole soil conditioning and plant conditioning as well as just with the ripening berries. Now, there are certified organic pyrethrums and other types of sprays. They're expensive. On a smaller scale, they might be feasible. And in those cases, you would be spraying and following the instructions much closer to when the berries are coming ripe because you don't want to waste it. And then the problem with SWD is the life cycle is so short, and elderberry is ripening at the height of when those little buggers are active. You would have to spray a little more frequently in order to completely control using that approach.
All right, so another 2-part question here. Do you know of farms in Ohio? And then also, if I wanted to sell to your co-op, what would I need to do to get them to you?
Well, okay, yes, we do have some growers in Ohio. Most of them are not well established at this point that I'm aware of. And basically, as far as if you've got berries to sell, and it's not large quantities or whatever, mostly what we've done is ship from your farm or from your cold storage. We don't have a lot of capital in this co-op, and so we don't, you know, long term I hope to have regional centers and just buy stuff in quantity from farmers like, you know, the corn or soybean co-ops do, or dairy co-ops, but and we are an open co-op as well, so you don't have to be a member for us to buy from you. Members do get priority on supply and care, of course, but I'll buy from anyone as long as I know that the quality of the berries is good. And right now, there's a lot of trust involved in that. And just because, let's say you were the person who's asking about all the stem questions, and you've got berries, but you think there's too many stems in it. Well, as long as I know and I tell the buyer up front that we'll have a little higher, and they say, well, we'll take it anyway, and I say, okay, we'll reduce the price a little bit, and you know, they'll probably still sell at this point. But the whole key is expectations. The buyer doesn't like big surprises.
Expectations and communication.
Yeah.
So if you're only doing a small farm, is there one cultivar that you would recommend to start with?
Well, Bob Gordon's really good. Ranch is really good. Ranch is the most favored of all the growers. That's the most favored cultivar at this point across the board, and that would be followed by Bob Gordon, and then I think Adams. Now there's some new cultivars coming I have an experience with, and they're hard to get a hold of, like Pocahontas. And I think I mentioned before, Terry's promised me a couple plants, but availability there on that is limited. But the folks in Missouri have had a lot of good things to say about Pocahontas, and that it could be the favored cultivar of the future.
And then I'm going to be posting a link for the perennialmap.org. And I'm not sure how many farmers are on here right now, but maybe Chris, you've had experience with this too. But it's a good way to find who's growing what and where. So I'm just going to post that because there seems to be a lot of questions about where.
Yes, yeah, I've worked with those folks in the past, but if you the best is to send me an email if you want to be hooked up. I've got email lists for every state, and basically, if you are serious about growing commercially, even small scale, I can put you in contact with other growers in your state or in your area, and so far everyone has appreciated that, and they get to know each other, and then in some cases they've been able to help each other out. So I'm doing that because I've got members from coast to coast. I have people interested from coast to coast, and if someone is interested in that, then they'll send me an email, and I make sure they're interested in it. And a lot of people who call me, I'll talk to them, and unless they follow up with contact info, I never bother them again. And I spend more time than perhaps I should doing that. Harry has in the past as well, just to try to get this thing going. But increasingly, I'm coming into contact with people who want to grow it seriously, and they want to be connected with other growers in their area. And I'm doing that right now with these email lists. And as we get further along, then I hope those to develop into full-scale hubs, and we can have a process for shared storage and processing and things like that. This is for some of those of you who didn't hear me before, the co-op just recently received a USDA planning grant, $40,000. And we're working exactly on that and using a couple of farms in the Montrose, Minnesota area as our template for that. And also with input from Main Street Project and other growers, so that we can develop the plans, the cost, the structure, and what's needed and what would work on the next step up in scaling up these regional hubs or area hubs. And then in combining that also with some processing alternatives on a little bit larger scale. And once, of course, we have that template, then we'll be able to go to the next step, which is value-added producing grant, and I'll be able to have the paperwork to go to CoBank, my bank, to get bank financing as needed so that we can actually get one of these things going, work it out, try to find all of the difficulties and deal with the difficulties and find solutions so that it'll be an easier situation for other hubs as they develop across the country.
And I also just realized that I was typing unmuted this next thing, but I wanted to plug the Savannah Institute's. This year we're doing the Perennial Farm Gathering, and it's online, and we're working on building that community of growers as well.
Yeah, and I've been invited to participate with that as well, and that's on my plan. And
Good.
Savannah Institute also has a dedicated elderberry person, David, who's been really, really good, and he's been visiting some of the different farmers. The last farm I referred him to was Cape Organics, for example. And so with Savannah Institute's help, we hope to put some more organized materials together for people who are interested in growing or developing and scaling up their elderberry orchards.
Yes. Could you also talk about which varieties work well for mowing off each year and which ones need to be selectively pruned?
Okay, basically all of the cultivars that are primarily sold by River Hills Harvest or by Regeneration Acres, Natasha Simeon, and other commercial growers are going to be those that can be cut to the ground every year. Not usually the first year you plant them, but I mean once they're established. And that would be Bob Gordon, Ranch, Adams, Wildwood, I assume Pocahontas. I have a Marge, which is a name cultivar that will not do that well. John's does not do that well. You have to prune John's, you have to prune Marge. I've not worked with Nova. The only grower I know wasn't too happy with that. But that is a question to ask. Most of your wild will not like that. So going back to the earlier question about getting elderberry from the county, for example, most of those you will not be able to cut to the ground. Now that doesn't mean you can't still use them. You just have to develop a different approach, perhaps, as some people grow raspberries where they'll mow down 1/3 of their area every year. So basically it has a course of 3 years or 4 years of which it's not cut. And that's a little bit wild, but it's low on labor inputs on that, and it's not as clean or anything, but it will give you some control and allow you to use maybe locally wild available elderberries that maybe are already on your farm, or like if you're in the northern area and they're growing and they're yielding, well, you don't want to turn your nose up at that. You want to try to find a way to make it work for you. And so that's just one way to do that if you can't cut it down every year.
And then can you clarify what you mean by freeze dried? What exactly is the process?
Well, you're using a freeze dryer. Basically, you're putting fresh or frozen berries onto little metal trays, and they dry them and using ultra cold temperatures. And you can buy them on Amazon in smaller scale for $400 or $500 a piece. I'm looking to buy something more around $30,000 mid-range so that we can get the cost down, because I've got commercial buyers that would like a couple £100 a month, for instance. And that's a lot of berries, and they can't afford to pay $100 a pound.
There's a question about farms in northern Indiana or South Michigan, and I would just again encourage you to check out the perennialmap.org. But Chris, do you have any suggestions off the top of your head?
Well, the best thing is just send me an email where you are and what state you're in and about where you are in the state and what level of interest you are. Are you just trying to learn more about it, or are you already growing and you want to know what other growers? And then I can hook you up if I have anybody. Otherwise, what I'll do is I'll start a group for you. So that's how it happens. We get someone, and Tennessee, like Leslie, and we get it started. And then some other people come on and they get added in. And the same thing happened in Florida, Virginia, different places. And there are more growers out there that I'm aware of, and more people even on my list than I have in these groups. I've only really been a little more focused on this over maybe it's been the last 18 months. So that's the way it's going to develop. And then there are the grower groups that are on Facebook, Elderberry Growers Connect and River Hills Harvest Growers. And so there are a few groups through Facebook as well, and you can meet and learn about people. Out of Ohio and Kentucky, there's an elderberry marketing group, Elderberry Trade Association. I'm sorry, Elderberry Trade Association that I'm loosely affiliated with and help. John Moody has been a key factor in that, and that's I'm actually going to be doing a little something later today with John for that group. And a lot of those people are in Ohio and in Kentucky and perhaps Southern Michigan. I don't know.
And then suggested brand names for the freeze dryer, so I'm buying the correct ones, or maybe even a resource.
It's Harvest. It's something like Harvest Host or something like that. Harvest Master. Yeah, there's only one.
Well, that makes it easy.
Yeah, at least the last time I looked, there was. But you'll see it, and it comes in several different sizes. But that's what Terry uses, and I don't have one, but I know a couple other growers who have them.
Right on. And then you have a message from Leslie. She says, "Hi, Chris. This is Leslie. Just drove 16 hours up to Wisconsin and arrived 20 minutes ago. I'm having some luck with building mound systems on that concrete chert.
Okay.
We'll send you photos. What
Good.
works and what doesn't."
Good. Well, and you have to do that. See, like my home in South Dakota here, the land is a little clayish, and so I planted 13 elderberry, I guess, small plants that I brought with me from my home in Minnesota, and that's what I had to do. I had to dig a big pit out of the hardened clay, and I filled that with a mixture of compost and manure, and that's the home to get them started. And then once they're started, the roots will spread out and they'll break through a lot of things and help spread the good earth. Elderberry is a good plant for improving the quality of the ground it's growing on. And the thing is that almost everywhere it's going to need that mulch because the roots aren't hairy and it needs the mycorrhizal, the fungal environment. So mulching elderberry wherever you are is a good thing to do at the beginning of every year, or you do it at the end of the year. If you are cutting your elderberry in late fall, early winter before you've got snow and the fields are too messy, you can cut it and chop it up, and then you can just go ahead and mulch over the rows or blocks, and it'll come up real nice in the spring and poke right through all of that and be very happy.
All right. Do you know of a co-op that covers West Central Arkansas?
Food co-op? There's a few food stores there, but as far as Elderberry Cooperative, no, I cover everywhere. But that doesn't mean there's not something that exists. But I've got, we're looking for members everywhere.
And then
we have a number of people that farm in southern Missouri, and many of them are interested in a cooperative, and they have sort of a cooperative structure loosely, and that works with Terry. So, that's all I can tell you about that. And if you're in Arkansas, then and if you're growing elderberries of any kind of scale, then you should contact Terry Durham, and he most likely would like to buy your berries as well.
And then maybe this would be a good resource question as well, but do you know of a cultivar that you would recommend for Northwest Ohio, or is there Yeah, is there a good resource? Do you have that on your website where people can?
We have resources page, but that would be about the same as we'd say, you know, for anywhere in the upper Midwest. It'd be Ranch, Bob Gordon and Adams are the ones we know. And I imagine Pocahontas, but I have no experience with that and it's not available.
So stay tuned or report back to us. Besides,
Yeah, I'm looking forward to working and having a little bit of fun with that plant.
yeah. Besides mowing, when plants get older and crowd each other, is it beneficial to thin a row by digging up or killing portions to thin that
Too
row?
much work. Just cut them down. They'll take care of themselves. If you cut it close enough to the ground, they'll naturally, you know, sort themselves out based on the nutrients available. And then other than that, I mean, the real key to keeping shape and configuration is mowing frequently enough so that the saplings and the sprouts don't get too big that your mower can't cut them cleanly.
In that freeze dryer brand that you said there's the only one, is that Harvest Right? Is that what you said it was?
Yeah, that sounds right.
Okay. Right.
Right.
Yeah, so there's a contest right now, which everyone should check out in the comments section if you could see it. So that would be kind of fun to just win one of those.
Sure, why not?
Right? And
Yep.
then just a time check right now, we're at 1:16, so I think we'll just take this last question and then wrap things up. Are there any variety recommendations for Western Washington? Mild winters, very wet, lots of glacial till or clay soils.
Okay, so you're in Washington State, is what I'm assuming. And if it's clayish, Ranch is the one that has shown itself to be a little more tolerant of clay. So I'd start with that. And of course, you do have the cerulean, the blue elderberry, which is much more tree form. And Katie Reneker, I see she's here from Carmel area in California, is working with the University of California on commercialization challenges and improvements using the blue elderberry. And I have a program right now. We're developing a regional hub in Washington State that right now is being based on the blue elder, but we want to expand that to include the Sambucus canadensis there, which does grow there. And we've had more and more interest of people wanting to grow that one. But that's still one of the more wild open frontiers of elderberry, and which is pretty much the case everywhere. I guess Missouri is the most familiar and tamed, and the further you get away from there, you're out more on the fringes of development, and there's less support and less general knowledge in the university or extension systems.
Wonderful. And then Katie shared some contact information. So Western elderberry growers, everybody contact her as well. Yeah. So do you have any closing remarks? I mean,
well, also there's a Pacific or West Coast elderberry growers group on Facebook. So look for it. They've got some great folks in there.
Yeah, that is the one useful thing about Facebook.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I don't get in there very often, and especially now since I've just moved and we've got so much we're trying to get done before winter here in the new house, and I have virgin lawn that I'm converting to edibles.
Yeah, send pictures. That sounds great.
Yep. We're gonna bring some life there and perennials and get a smaller scale food forest than I had in Minneapolis, but it'll work.
Yeah. Well, that region that you moved to, I think needs it.
Yep. It's a little drier here. It's windier. I've got the elderberry planted on the west side as a windbreak. So
Right on.
we got it started.
Well, thank you so much for your time today, Chris. This is just amazing. And I look forward to seeing you at the PFG, the Perennial Farm Gathering. And yeah.
And if anyone has a question that they didn't think of, you wake up in the middle of the night, don't let it bother you. Just send me an email and I'll answer it as soon as I can.
And give them your personal cell phone for those midnight phone calls. How about that?
No, I've had to start turning that off. I have people in California, not Katie, but people in California, you know, they're calling me and, hey, I'm trying to slow down and end the day, and they get me all fired up with stuff. So I had to start limiting my phone hours a little bit because I don't have a personal secretary.
Right. Chris's office hours, 9 to 5 Central Time. All right.
Yeah, that's when I'm not focused on something, because I can do one thing at a time, unless I'm managing a couple of different computer things going on at once, but then I can't do anything else but that. So people are more important, and so if it's related to a person, I can handle about one at a time. Otherwise, I lose it, because I have to focus on the person and trying to help them and answer their questions or whatever.
Well, that's not a bad way to be, I suppose.
No, it's just the way I am.
And for Eric, I just posted Chris's, there's a contact link on his website there.
Oh yeah, all over, including the phone number.
Remember those office hours though.
Yeah, no, literally, I probably talk to 1,000 to 2,000 different people a year. That's some more than once, mostly not more than once or twice, unless we're getting some orders through, or they're trying to develop a product. I have a lot of businesses working on product development, and I have a pipeline of buyers that will be good for the next 20 years, believe me. As we scale up, it's sold.
Yes. All right, agroforestry. We're gonna
That's right.
replace the current farming system.
Well, we'll at least show them how to do it, and
Yeah,
be a wonderful compliment.
exactly. Well, thank you
Can't grow
again.
very well under a tree, you know, it doesn't work. But there's much better and improved ways for growing corn and soybeans, and that's what Forever Green is about, and that's why I'm very happy to be affiliated with them as well, because they are addressing that, and taking some of the more conventional approaches to farming and bringing it more in line with our environmental needs, and finding a way to do that and transition farmers in that way. And it's a very important work.
It is. It
Well,
is.
it's some of the other, you know, crops and things that Savannah Institute's working with, you know, and we need more chestnut trees, et cetera. I mean, trees are hugely important. And there's there's a documentary on Netflix even right
Yep.
now, soil health.
I was just going to suggest that for everyone here.
Yeah, if you remember the exact name is eluding me right now. But
Kiss the ground.
yeah, Kiss the Ground.
Yeah.
Great documentary.
And it's hopeful too. At the end, you know, you're like, oh, we can change this. So.
Well, and I think if nothing else, if it gets across to people that we can do more to sequester carbon by improving how we manage our soils than trying to worry about how many natural gas wells or oil wells we got to shut down. You know, not that we shouldn't manage those kind of emissions, but the soil health is the major factor as to why we have excess carbon dioxide. And they make that very clear, and they do an excellent, simple job of it, and as well as the scientifically based one. And then you get the stories of the different farmers, so you see how it all works. It's a very good documentary.
Yeah, it is. Yep. And plastic straws aren't enough.
No, not that we shouldn't do it, but
not that you shouldn't do it. But composting, maybe try that first.
Yeah.
And so to answer Eric's question, he just bought a 35-acre farm and is planning to grow elderberries. Any resources for planning? I know Savannah Institute has a bunch, but Chris, do you want to talk about what you have?
Yes, and on the grower website, there is a resource page, and there are some folks there that help with soil and help in with finances, consulting. So, and are familiar with elderberry, which is why they're on our resource page.
Wonderful. Okay, well, everyone have a lovely day. Yeah, we're gonna let Chris get back to his homesteading before winter comes.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure as always. And I just encourage you all to start growing elderberry small, And and that's proportionate. I mean, if you want sometime 5 or 10 acres, well, then your small is going to be bigger than someone that just wants an acre. But get the feel of it, work with it, and if you're happy with it on an imaginable scale, then grow it up. By doing it this way, in worst case scenario, you'll always have your own personal supply of elderberry, but you won't be kicking yourself 5 years down the line. Why did I grow so much? It's so hard to dig up and get rid of. And that is the truth.
That is good advice. All right, well, thank you everyone. Have a lovely day, and we'll see you at the fall webinar series, or nutshells.
Okay, sayonara.
Bye.